Yeah, October 7th was awful. Absolutely.
Obviously.
Terrible attack. But also, what they've done to Gaza is insane.
It's insane.
And if you can't see that, if you can't say that, and your response is, Israel has the right to defend itself. Like, what are you talking about? Against what? Children?
Right.
Against women and children that are getting blown apart? Against aid workers that are getting killed? It's insane. And no one wants to talk about it. And if you do talk about it, you're anti-Semitic, which is so strange. Like, I don't know how they wrangled that.
Joe Rogan is making some of his strongest comments thus far against Israel's genocide in Gaza, arguing that what they've done is, quote, effing insane. Rogan's guest on this episode of his podcast was Amjad Masad, a tech CEO whose father is a Palestinian refugee. He tells Rogan the story of his grandparents getting forced out of Palestine during the 1948 Nakba, and here's how Joe responded. Take a look.
That whole thing where kicking people out of Palestine is such an inconvenient story today. When people are talking about Israel and Palestine and the conflict, they do not like talking about what happened in 1948.
Now, Rogan isn't the only conservative manosphere podcaster speaking out against the atrocities in Gaza. We're hearing very similar takes from people like Dillon and Theo. Take a look.
Are the people that are starving in Gaza now, is it better? Do they have food, or is it, or what is happening over there? Israel tanks kill 59 people in Gaza crowd trying to get food. Well, not ideal. Not ideal, and this is from that Hamas rag Reuters. Israel military kills 23 Palestinians near aid site in Gaza, witnesses and medics say. What is the argument for killing the people trying to get food? Does it make sense for the United States to fund that behavior?
You see all these photos of people, just children, women, people, body parts, just people like putting their kids back together. And I just can't believe that we're watching that and that more isn't said about it. I think we're watching probably like, one of the sickest things that's ever happened. It feels to me like it's a genocide that's happening.
Now we're gonna hear from someone who is totally fine with thousands of innocent civilians being killed. But first, Cenk, what do you make of Joe Rogan's comments?
Yeah, so look, these independent broadcasters are actually independent. And that doesn't mean that they're going to agree with you. It doesn't mean that they're going to agree with you on most of the things. And I don't know if you're on the right or the left, if you're watching or if you're in the middle, but they have no obligation to agree with you. But they also have no obligation to agree with Fox News. So in the old days, you had MSNBC and Fox News, and they were talking point machines, and they both spit out talking points for the Republican Party and the Democratic Party. So since a lot of these podcasters voted for Trump, there was a belief that, oh, well, then they must be just like the old days. So they're gonna back what Trump says 100%, just like every anchor on Fox News did in his first term, right? Unquestioningly, and every right-wing media host did in his first term. Well, I said that they wouldn't, and here they are, they're not doing it. And so the important part of that, guy, isn't who's right and who's wrong. What the important part is, they are actually using their eyes and ears. They are actually using their independent judgment. And we might get super frustrated that their judgment doesn't agree with us, even most of the time. But they're not robots. They're real people, and they're looking at Gaza and going, it makes me sick. And I don't want to fund that. And I don't know why we're funding that. Because in the old days, if you were on cable news, didn't matter if you're right, left, middle, nothing mattered. If you said that about Israel, you were gonna get fired, and you were gonna get called an anti-Semite, and your career was going to be over. This is why I prefer the populist woods, because here are 3 of the top podcasters that voted for Trump, all saying this is nonsense what Israel's doing in Gaza. It's disgusting, and it is indefensible. By the way, an Israeli soldier has now joined them. We're gonna share that those comments in a second with you, right? And so the fact that truth is breaking out in American media is amazing, to the point, Jordan, where Rogan started questioning 1948. I mean, that is different level of third rail that you can't touch. Because there's the mythology around 1948 that they came in and there was no people there at all. And then when the Israelis declared a state, the Palestinians decided to go on a picnic and never came back. No, they were driven from their homes. That's what happened. It might make you uncomfortable and you might not want to hear that, but that's definitely what happened. The Israelis drove the Palestinians out. That's why it's called the Nakba. And yes, they murdered a lot of them. It wasn't like they were having a picnic and had a slight disagreement and moved their families' houses, moved where they had lived for hundreds, some of them thousands of years. No, they were driven from there. So that doesn't mean that Israel shouldn't exist today. Many, many things have happened since then, right? But the idea that Israel is the victim and that the Muslims are the terrorists and the dirty savages and the violent ones, that mythology is finally breaking on the left and the right. So that's why I think it's a beautiful day in America that these guys did turn out to be independent.
Yeah, what's been interesting over the past couple of years is in addition to just the growing base of support for Palestinians and potentially a Palestinian state or some sort of solution where everyone has equal rights there. You see a deeper understanding across the board of the history. I think what was so effective, especially early, was the pro-Israel camps framing of this as starting on October 7th. And this isn't to dismiss innocent civilians being killed on October 7th. Certainly not. We never want to see innocent civilians killed anywhere. But there's decades and decades of context that help people understand why an event like that might occur. And you're seeing like this. I don't know if I ever would have expected Joe Rogan to talk about the Nakba in sympathetic terms, but here we are. So as this war has raged on and more people see it as just disgusting and something that they can't tolerate or remain silent for, there has been a deeper level of education and understanding, which has been interesting to watch. But while more and more independent podcasters and people with eyes and ears are condemning this war, people who support Benjamin Netanyahu, like Alan Dershowitz, are continuing to defend the slaughter of civilians. Take a look.
They hide behind children and babies. They use them as human shields. And that's why Israel has to go in order to dismantle Hamas. Israel never benefits from killing a civilian. Why would any Israeli ever want to kill a civilian?
So why does it keep doing it?
They lose in your court of public opinion.
Yes.
They lose on your television show.
Yes.
If they kill a civilian, they don't want to kill civilians. Hamas makes them kill civilians. But if you want to destroy Hamas, you have to kill the civilians who are being used as human shields. It's a tragic choice. I wish Israel didn't have to make it.
And unfortunately, slaughtering civilians is exactly what they're doing. Not according to us, but according to an IDF soldier who blew the whistle. An Israeli reservist who served 3 tours of duty in Gaza has told Sky News that his unit was often ordered to shoot anyone entering areas soldiers defined as no-go zones, regardless of whether they posed a threat. A practice, he says, left civilians dead where they fell. We have a territory that we are in, and the commands are, everyone that comes inside needs to die. If they're inside, they're dangerous, and you need to kill them, no matter who it is. He said troops killed civilians arbitrarily, and that the criteria for whether or not to open fire on civilians varied depending on the commander. They might be shot, they might be captured. It really depends on the day, the mood of the commander. Every commander can choose for himself what he does, so it's kind of like the Wild West. So some commanders can really decide to do war crimes and bad things and don't face the consequences of that. The soldier described a prevailing belief among troops that all Gazans were terrorists, even when they were clearly unarmed civilians. This perception, he said, was not challenged and was often endorsed by commanders. Cenk, how do you feel when you hear that?
Yeah, so I'm actually heartened to see now a number of IDF soldiers talking to the press, mainly in Israel. This one happens to be outside of Israel, and saying, "Oh, my conscience can't bear this. We've become the bad guys, and I can't stand it anymore." And it's not just IDF soldiers, it's two former Israeli prime ministers saying the same thing. It's, by the way, powerful movie from Brave New Films, Gaza, Journalist Under Fire. Check it out on bravenewfilms.org. Holocaust survivors saying, no, stop, please stop, please stop. We're not supposed to be doing this. We're supposed to be fighting against this. So, okay, of course, the diehard Israeli supporters remain, like Alan Dershowitz. And now, full-blown terrorist ideology. That's what Dershowitz just said. He said, we had to kill the civilians. You know, Hamas says the same exact thing. They say the Israeli civilians are hiding behind their democracy, and they're the ones who are occupying the Palestinians. They're the ones voting to occupy us. They're the ones selecting these leaders to kill us and to take our land. So we didn't have a choice. We had to kill the Israeli civilians. And now Dershowitz is saying the mirror image. He's saying, well, Hamas is hiding behind their civilians, so we had to murder their civilians. That is terrorist ideology. And it's not that surprising because Israel's now become a terrorist state. And so they've now killed 500 times the number of children that Hamas has killed in this same conflict. Hamas killed 36 Israeli kids. It's a crime, it's terrible, it's awful. Those poor kids, they didn't do anything wrong, they were just kids. Now Israel has killed well over 17,000 kids. And as you see from the soldiers, and this is not the first story, this is one of many. You should read into Operation Salted Fish, where they're basically playing red light, green light with Palestinians trying to get food. Squid Games level horrors. The Where's Daddy program, where the AI picks someone to kill, they wait till he gets home so they murder his children and his family with him. These are decisions that Israeli commanders are making. Kill the civilians. That's because they're terrorists. Either the word terrorism means something and applies to both sides if they both go to kill civilians on purpose, or it doesn't mean anything and it's just a racist term that people like Dershowitz use because they don't want to say, oh, I want you to all hate Muslims so Israel can get more of their land. So they have to say like, oh, they're terrorists. And then when you say, well, aren't you killing civilians? You're like, of course Israel has to kill civilians. No, Israel does not have to kill civilians. They choose to, that's what makes them a terrorist state. And yes, when you kill 500 times the number of children that the terrorist group Hamas has, then you're 500 times the terrorist. So I love that the independent broadcasters and podcasters have broken from the monstrosity and the war crimes of the current government of Israel. I commend them for that. I wish they got there earlier, but I'll take the win as it is. And obviously and isn't that amazing? Actually, one last thing real quick, Jordan. Those guys, the podcasters I heard were never gonna break from Trump, broke from Trump on this quicker than mainstream media. Because right now, mainstream media is still pretending that Israel's innocent and they're not a terrorist state and that they're not killing civilians on purpose. I don't see any cable news anchors doing that. Do you see a single cable news anchor that said what Joe Rogan, Tim Dillon, or Theo Von said?
I don't know. I think they will try everything they can to spin this. Like what I've been thinking a lot about is how they have tried to dispel any factual reporting or estimates of civilian deaths and say, well, trying to discredit all of it as, well, these are Hamas numbers, or no, these people weren't civilians. And I think it is encouraging that now soldiers are speaking up about what they saw. Sure, we're seeing aid groups and intergovernmental bodies and nonprofits. They've been sounding the alarm for years. My hope, maybe I'm completely off base and maybe I'm too optimistic. My hope here is that people within those ranks, when you actually have, IDF soldiers saying, no, they're doing this, they're encouraging it, we know what we're doing and it's wrong. Hopefully that is what could be a catalyst for, an undeniable groundswell of opposition within Israel and the Israeli government. I mean, this gets into larger conversations around Netanyahu trying to preserve power, of course, but hopefully that becomes impossible to ignore, and maybe that is the avenue. And maybe I'm being way too wildly optimistic, but it does seem like a source like that and more people like that could be the catalyst for change.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah, last thing I'll say on it is that the one thing I'm sure of is the very last people on earth who will break from Israel is American mainstream media and American politicians. The overwhelming majority of Congress will be the last ones on that hill. And they'll, to the bitter end, as they see Israel commit one horrific act of terrorism after another, and they do on a mass scale that creates a genocide. We're all seeing it, starving the Palestinians to death. We're all seeing it. The people are the most corrupt people on earth are our congressmen and senators who go, no, the AIPAC money tells me they did not do that. They are innocent, wonderful, moral army, and all the no good Muslims are the savage terrorists. That's the absolute scum of the earth that are our politicians. They'll be the last 535 people in this country to stand with Israel's genocide. To be fair, there's a wonderful about couple of dozen or so that are not in that group. So about last 500 to stand with Israel's genocide. Great people like Bernie Sanders, Ro Khanna, and others have already broken from it and can't stand that we're funding this. Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows.